Ah, yes, the long-forgotten Zhao, the power-crept Tier 10 cruiser. Except it's been buffed, and unfortunately it's just a health buff. If it were me, I would prefer the torpedo angles and the turret angles be buffed, since you're almost curve first levels of turret angles on this ship, which is really bad if you didn't know. And of course, the torpedo arcs are really, really difficult to make use of, given you have to go basically flat broadside to actually fire them off. And Zhao does not have the tankiest broadside. You have troll armor, but it's not the best armor anymore. Troll armor works sometimes, whereas petro armor works all the time, right? You'd certainly rather have that. And I'm not saying we want more petros in the game, I'm just saying that Zhao doesn't have the best armor. Of course, at the beginning of the match, you're going to play much like Venezia will. You're going to try and push up with your destroyer and see if you can take an early engagement and take a big chunk off of a destroyer. I wasn't able to do that given that there was a Venezia there. Probably could have shot the DD, but I initially shot at the Venezia. The AP is okay on this ship, and that is why I swapped to it there, but honestly, your bread and butter is the HE, and you can see, well, you will see and you can see just how devastating it is. I've had 9,000 damage salvos from a Zhao. And keep in mind, this ship doesn't have too bad a reload. It's somewhere in that 13-second range. So if you're pumping out 8 or 9k damage with the HE, that's Goliath levels of HE damage, and you got a better reload. Better shell arcs than Goliath. Of course, you don't have the super heal that a Goliath does have, but it's still a really, really good ship, and Zhao now has nearly 50k HP. If you take the special commander for the Japanese commanders, I believe there's one you can get that actually has an improved survivability expert, which should get you close to 50k HP, which is more in line with the other tier 10 heavy cruisers. Of course, they don't have to take survivability expert to get that, but it's still a little bit closer. And the HE and damage output is still just as insane on this ship. It really is a kiting ship, though, that you're seeing that this ship is going to be very strong in this game, and that's because battleships just decide to push into us, and we have spotting. It's crucial that we have both those things. There's 8,000 damage right there into a Thunderer. We love shooting at Thunderers, especially when they're shooting HE back at us. If he was shooting AP, we'd have to be a lot more careful, but HE we can manage, we can heal through a little bit of that stuff. Another 6k salvo in. Zhao is a solid ship, honestly. I just don't think it's worth grinding if it's your first tier 10 cruiser, or among the first tier 10s. The problem with Zhao, of course, is that other ships do the Zhao's role better. This kiting role could be much better off with something like a Henry, since you have that reload booster to relight fires as soon as somebody damage controls. If you're looking for the ambush destroyer hunter, and you're playing with a DD who's going to be spotting that destroyer for you and taking that engagement, well, you're going to want the Venezia. It just does a better job of that initial burst alpha damage. And if you're playing a flanking kind of annoyance role, I do think the Venezia is generally going to be better. There's just better options for a lot of different positions in this game, and that's why you don't see Zhao in competitive hardly at all. It's not a very specialized ship, much like Hindenburg, and unlike Hindenburg, it's much more difficult to make use of its damage output just because it's not as tanky. Doesn't have as many heals, doesn't have as good armor as the Hindenburg does. So even though your damage outputs are similar to Hindenburg as far as the HE DPM goes, it really comes down to the Hindenburg is tankier and can make use of it more often. But Zhao actually has more effective DPM, I'd say, just because it has improved dispersion. It's somewhere in between cruiser and destroyer levels of dispersion, so it is much improved. It's much like those battleships that we say have battle cruiser dispersion. It's about that much better than normal cruiser dispersion, which is really comfortable, and that's why we're getting these really nice salvos in on some of these battleships here, as we're up to 130k damage, and we're only 8 minutes into this match. It's a good ship when you're in the right position and the right scenario. So I'm glad Wargaming has buffed Zhao, and again, I'd prefer those buffs be somewhere else. I kind of liked the lower HP, great concealment kind of ship. If only they had maybe Atago torpedo angles and gun angles. That would be interesting. Maybe up the deck armor to Atago levels as well. That's one of the oddest things about this ship and the line is that Atago has a 41mm deck, meaning you can bounce any AP in the game, assuming it's at the right angle. And Zhao doesn't. Zhao gets a 30mm deck. So Atago being a tier 8 and getting that is a little bit odd, but firepower is no joke. And of course, the fire chance is monstrous as well as we get our 10th fire. We're definitely getting a little bit lucky this game, but we already got a Witherer. And it's a Witherer on 170k damage, meaning we have 110,000 damage raw. And that's really good. A lot of times, these ships that really get a lot of Witherers and a lot of fire damage are the ships like Smolensk, Colbert, these things that have low caliber HE that light a ton of fires. But you don't get all the pen damage, and that's why it's a little bit balanced as far as the fire damage goes. You kind of rely on that to do well. But a Zhao doesn't. It kind of gets both, which is really, really, really cool. So I'm actually a fan of Zhao. This is one of the ships I really enjoyed when I first started playing this game and first got into cruisers. I believe it was my first cruiser line I actually grinded up to. I got it instead of the Des Moines because Des Moines kind of sucked in comparison to the Zhao back in the day, if you can believe that. But Des Moines had a worse reload, worse armor, and didn't have radar. There was a lot of things. Zhao also could stealth fire. So maybe we abused that a little bit back in the day, which I'm very glad that is gone. 10 hits at that kind of range, 15, 16 kilometers, 10 out of 12, that's pretty good. Zhao's awesome. If you haven't played it in a long time, I would definitely recommend it. It's not going to be the best ship or the most influential carry ship, but if you get a chance to farm, it is really, really solid. And our troll armor not holding us up, holding up quite well there. You can see we actually got massively punished there, even though we weren't actually able to shoot our torpedoes or get our rear turrets off at the angle. We shot our torpedoes off, turned into angle, and then the shells hit us. So you definitely have to watch out when you're playing against some of these more AP focused ships. You can't get greedy for your rear turrets. I make a mistake here and not using my torpedoes sooner. You're going to see that, but Zhao has a weird issue with torpedoes in that it has a bit of a long activation window for the torpedoes, so that's kind of what I was worried about. I was trying to avoid a ram, first of all, here, and huge props to this guy for not going for the ram. That's so common these days. You see people just going for rams all the time. And yeah, I kind of don't do much in this drive-by here, but we also don't get punished. Now, it's arguable if I could have had the torpedoes off. You're going to see the angles here right now. You see the big gap between the ship and where the torpedoes actually activate. I think looking back, I actually froze the frame and stared at it for a little bit. I think I could have had the torpedoes off against him, but I wasn't thinking in the moment. Of course, you can't have perfect play every game. But looking back on it, I think I could have managed it. If you're wondering why I used widespread, it's to get that farthest left torpedo, the farthest back looking torpedo, even farther back. If you need better angles, try going widespread. It gets the torpedoes a little farther in front of your ship and a little farther behind your ship. It didn't really matter. The game is over in this one, so we could have had maybe another 10 or 20k more damage had we actually used our torpedoes correctly, or managed to get the drive-by off with some AP. But that's the Zhao, and this is the only game I've really played in the Zhao recently, so pretty solid for the one game that I played, 225k, and a Witherer Confederate. Pretty decent set of games, and I think it's worth saying you should probably try Zhao again if you haven't played it for a bit. The extra HP is really nice in these longer games, where oftentimes Zhao would run out of health and have to disengage. As far as the build goes for Zhao, I am running this for my upgrades. You can see range mod even over the improved bridge legendary mod, which doesn't give you quite as much range, but improves your dispersion. I just find tier 10 needs a little bit more range than that to be comfortable. You can definitely make it work, and if you're even feeling a little bit crazy, you can go reload mod. I have run that in the past, and it can work in the right game. So again, we're using aiming systems, which with your improved dispersion, you could consider main battery if you're finding that turret traverse isn't quite fast enough for you. If you're wondering why I have Hydro mod while I'm using defensive fire, it's because I often switch back and forth between defensive and Hydro, and I don't feel like using doubloons to demount and remount this over and over again. As far as the commander goes, this is what I've got. I'm actually using the Eye in the Sky here. I really value the ability to pop a spotter plane, use it for a little bit, and then have it go on cooldown and have it come back sooner rather than having the longer duration spotter planes. I really like this on some of these heavier cruisers that get the spotter planes. As far as the other upgrades go, the gun feeder is pretty useful against cruisers at medium to close range, maybe getting you a surprise dev strike or a surprise citadel salvo into someone who's not expecting it. Survivability expert, I think this is still necessary on Zhao, even with its buffed hit points here. You can see we still don't even have 50k. And concealment, I think, is a must. The rest are pretty standard, I would say. But that's the Zhao. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Have you been playing this ship recently? I was surprised how well that one went and wanted to show you guys. So thank you very much for watching, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.